The Dharma teacher Tan Luan, in his commentary on the Treatise on Rebirth in the Pure Land, states, I note that Bodhisattva Nagarjuna's commentary on the 10 Stages Sutra says, there are 2 ways by which a bodhisattva may reach the state of ayavayartika, or non-retrogression. One is the difficult-to-practice way, the other is the easy-to-practice way. The difficult-to-practice way is the same as the Sacred Way teachings, and the easy-to-practice way is the Pure Land teachings. Students of the Pure Land School should first of all understand this point. Though they may be people who have previously studied the Sacred Way teachings, if they wish to become followers of the Pure Land teachings, they must discard the Sacred Way and give their allegiance to the Pure Land teachings. Honen also says, regarding the passage in which the Reverend Shantao distinguished between correct and sundry practices and urged people to abandon the sundry and embrace the correct, concerning the first of the sundry practices, that of reading and reciting sutras, with the exception of the recitation of the meditation on the Buddha Infinite Life Sutra and the other sutras that preach rebirth in the Pure Land, the embracing, reading, and recitation of all other sutras, whether Mahayana or Hinayana, exoteric or esoteric, is to be regarded as a sundry practice. Concerning the third of the sundry practices, that of worshiping, with the exception of worshiping the Buddha Amida, the worshiping or honoring of any other Buddha or Bodhisattva or deity of this world is to be regarded as a sundry practice. In the light of his statement, I declare that one should abandon such sundry practices and concentrate upon the practice of the Pure Land teachings. What reason would we have to abandon the correct practices of the Pure Land teachings, which ensure that out of 100 persons, all 100 will be reborn in the Pure Land, and cling instead to the various sundry practices and procedures which could not save even one person in 1,000? Followers of the Way should ponder this carefully. Honen further states, in the Chen Yuan era catalog of the Buddhist canon, we find it recorded that from the 600 volumes of the Great Wisdom Sutra to the Eternity of the Law Sutra, the exoteric and esoteric sutras of Mahayana, or the Great Vehicle, totals 637 works in 2,883 volumes. The phrase from the Meditation Sutra, reading and reciting the Great Vehicle, should be applied to all these works. You should understand that when the Buddha was preaching according to the capacity of his various listeners, he for a time taught the 2 methods of concentrated meditation and unconcentrated meditation. But later, when he revealed his own enlightenment, he ceased to teach these 2 methods. The only teaching that, once revealed, shall never cease to be taught is the single doctrine of the Nembutsu. Honen also states, regarding the passage that says that the practitioner of the Nembutsu must possess 3 kinds of mind, it is found in the Meditation Sutra. In his commentary on that sutra, Shantao says, someone may ask if there are those who differ in understanding and practice from the followers of Nembutsu, persons of distorted and mistaken belief. How should we confront them? I will now make certain that their perverse and differing views will not cause trouble. These persons of evil views, with different understanding and different practices, are compared to a band of robbers who call back the traveler who has already gone 1 or 2 steps along his journey. In my opinion, When this commentary speaks of different understanding, different practices, varying doctrines, and varying beliefs, they are referring to the teachings of the Sacred Way. Finally, in a concluding passage, Honen says, if one wishes to escape quickly from the sufferings of birth and death, one should confront these two superior teachings and then proceed to put aside the teaching of the Sacred Way and choose those of the Pure Land. And if one wishes to follow the teachings of the Pure Land, one should confront the correct and sundry practices and then proceed to abandon all of the sundry and devote one's entire attention to the correct. When we examine these passages, we see that Honen quotes the erroneous explanations of Tan Luan, Tao Chou, and Shan Tao, and establishes the categories of the Sacred Way and the Pure Land teachings, and of the difficult to practice and the easy to practice ways. He then takes all the 637 works in 2,883 volumes that comprise the Mahayana teachings of the Buddha's lifetime, including those of the Lotus Sutra and the True Word Sutras, along with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the deities of this world, and assigns them all to the categories of the Sacred Way teachings, the difficult to practice way, and the sundry practices, and urges people to discard, close, ignore, and abandon them. With these four injunctions, he leads all people astray. On top of that, he groups together all the sage monks of the three countries of India, China, and Japan, as well as the students of Buddhism of the 10 directions, and calls them a band of robbers, causing the people to insult them. In doing so, he turns his back on the passage in the 3 Pure Land Sutras, the sutras of his own school, which contains Amida's vow to save the people, accepting only those who commit the 5 cardinal sins and those who slander the correct teaching. More fundamentally, he shows that he fails to understand the warning contained in the 2nd volume of the Lotus Sutra, the heart and core of the entire body of teachings the Buddha expounded in the 5 periods of his preaching life, which reads, if a person fails to have faith but instead slanders this sutra, when his life comes to an end, he will enter the Avicii hell. Now we have come to this latter age when people are no longer sages. Each enters his own dark road, and all alike forget the direct way. How pitiful that no one cures them of their blindness. How painful to see them taking up these false beliefs in vain. As a result, everyone from the ruler of the nation on down to the common people believes that there are no true sutras outside the 3 Pure Land Sutras, and no Buddhas other than the Buddha Amida with his 2 attendants. Once there were men like Dengyo, Gishin, Jikaku, and Chisho, who journeyed 10,000 miles across the waves to China to acquire the sacred teachings, and there visited the mountains and rivers to pay reverence to Buddha statues and carry them back. In some cases, they built holy temples on the peaks of high mountains in which to preserve those scriptures and statues. In other cases, they constructed sacred halls in the bottoms of deep valleys where such objects could be worshipped and honored. As a result, the Buddhas, Shakyamuni, and Medicine Master shone side by side, casting their influence upon present and future ages, while the Bodhisattvas' space treasury and earth repository brought benefit to the living and the dead. The rulers of the nation contributed districts or villages so that the lamps might continue to burn bright before the images, while the The stewards of the great estates gave their fields and gardens as an offering. But because of this book by Honin, this Nembutsu chosen above all, the Lord of the teachings, Shakyamuni, is forgotten, and all honor is paid to Amida, the Buddha of the Western land. The transmission of the law from Shakyamuni Buddha is ignored, and Medicine Master, the thus come one of the Eastern region, is neglected. Attention is paid only to the 3 Pure Land Sutras in 4 volumes, and all the other wonderful scriptures that Shakyamuni expounded throughout the 5 periods of his preaching life are cast aside. If temples are not dedicated to Amida, then people no longer have any desire to support them or pay honor to the Buddhas enshrined there. If priests are not practitioners of the Nembutsu, then people quickly forget all about giving those priests alms. As a result, the halls of the Buddha have fallen into ruin, scarcely a wisp of smoke rising above their moss-covered roof tiles, and the priests' quarters have become empty and dilapidated, the dew deep on the grasses in their courtyards. And in spite of such conditions, no one gives a thought to protecting the law or to restoring the temples. Hence the sage priests who once presided over the temples leave and do not return, and the benevolent deities who guarded the nation depart and no longer appear. This has all come about because of this Nembutsu chosen above all by Honin. How pitiful to think that in the space of a few decades, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people have been deluded by these devilish teachings, and in so many cases confused as to the true teachings of Buddhism. If people favor what is only incidental and forget what is primary, can the benevolent deities be anything but angry? If people cast aside what is perfect and take up what is biased, can the world escape the plots of demons? Rather than offering up 10,000 prayers for remedy, it would be better simply to outlaw this one evil. This time the guest was truly enraged and said, "In the ages since our original teacher, the Buddha Shakyamuni, preached the 3 Pure Land Sutras, the Dharma teacher Tan Luan had originally studied the 4 treatises, but abandoned them and put all his faith in the Pure Land teachings. Similarly, the meditation master Tao Cho ceased to spread the varied practices of the Nirvana Sutra and devoted all his attention to propagating the practice that leads one to the Western Pure Land. The Reverend Shan Tao discarded the sundry practices and established the single practice of the Nembutsu, and the supervisor of priests, Eshin, collected essential passages from various sutras to form his work, making the single practice of the Nembutsu the essence of his teaching. Such was the manner in which these men honored and respected the Buddha Amida, and unaccountable numbers of people, as a result, were able to gain rebirth in the Pure Land. Of particular note was the sage Honin, who as a child entered the monastery on Mount Hai. By the time he was 17, he had worked his way through all 60 volumes of Tendai literature and had investigated all the 8 schools and mastered their essentials. In addition, he had read through the entire body of sutras and treatises 7 times and exhausted all the works of exegesis and biography. His wisdom shone like the sun and moon, and his virtue exceeded that of the earlier teachers. In spite of all this, he was in doubt as to the proper path to emancipation, and could not make out the true meaning of nirvana. Therefore, he read and examined all the text he could, pondered deeply, and considered every possibility, and in the end put aside all the sutras and concentrated on the single practice of Nembutsu. In addition, he received confirmation of his decision when Shantao miraculously appeared to him in a dream, and he proceeded to spread his doctrines among friends and strangers in all four corners of the land. Thereafter he was hailed as a reincarnation of Bodhisattva, great power, or was revered as Shantao reborn. In every quarter, people of eminent and lowly birth alike bowed their heads in respect, and men and women from all over Japan sought him. Since that time, the springs and autumns have succeeded each other, and the years have piled upon years, and yet you insist upon putting aside the venerable teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha contained in the Pure Land Sutras and willfully speak evil of the passage describing the oath of the Buddha Amida. Why do you try to blame the sacred age of Honin for the disasters of recent years? Going out of your way to slander the former teachers of Pure Land doctrines and to heap abuse on the sage Honin. You are, as the saying goes, deliberately blowing back the fur and hunting for flaws in the leather, deliberately piercing the skin in hopes of drawing blood. From ancient times to the present, the world has never seen such a speaker of evil. You had better learn a little caution and restraint. When you pile up such grave offenses, how can you hope to escape punishment? I am afraid even to sit here in your company. I must take up my staff and be on my way." The host, smiling, restrained his guest and said, "Insects that live on smartweed forget how bitter it tastes. Those who stay long in privies forget how foul the smell is. Here you listen to my good words and think them wicked, point to a slanderer of the law and call him a sage, mistrust a correct teacher and take him for an evil priest. Your confusion is great indeed, and your offense anything but light. Listen to my explanation of how this confusion arose, and let us discuss the matter in detail. Shakyamuni Buddha expounded the 5 periods of doctrines, established the order in which they were preached, and divided them into the provisional and the true teachings. But Tan Luan, Tao Chou, and Shan Tao embraced the provisional teachings and forgot about the true ones, went by what had been taught in the earlier period of the Buddha's life, and discarded what was taught later. They were not the kind of men who delve into the deep places of Buddhist doctrine. Honin, in particular, though he followed the practices advocated by these earlier men, was ignorant as to their source. How do we know this? Because he lumped together all the 637 Mahayana scriptures in 2,883 volumes, and along with them all, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the deities of this world, and urged people to discard, close, ignore, and abandon them, with these 4 injunctions corrupting the hearts of all people. Thus he poured out perverted words of his own invention and took absolutely no cognizance of the explanations put forth in the Buddhist scriptures. His is the worst kind of baseless talk, a clear case of defamation. There are no words to describe it, no way to censure it that is not too mild. And yet people all put faith in this baseless talk of his, and without exception pay honor to his Nembutsu chosen above all. As a consequence, they revere the 3 sutras of the Pure Land and cast all the other sutras aside. They look up to one Buddha alone, Amida of the land of perfect bliss, and forget about the other Buddhas. A man such as Honen is in truth the arch-enemy of the Buddhas and the scriptures, and the foe of sage priests and ordinary men and women alike. And now his distorted teachings has spread throughout the 8 regions of the country, permeating the 10 directions. You became quite horrified when I blamed an earlier period for the disasters that have occurred in recent years. Perhaps I should cite a few examples from the past to show you that you are mistaken in your feelings. The 2nd volume of Great Concentration and Insight quotes a passage from Records of the Historian that says, "In the closing years of the Chao dynasty, there were persons who let their hair hang down, went about naked to the waist, and did not observe the rites and regulations." The annotations on Great Concentration and Insight in the 2nd volume explains this passage by quoting from So's commentary on Spring and Autumn Annals as follows. When King Ping of the Chao first moved his capital to the east, he saw men by the Yi River who let their hair hang down and performed sacrifices in the fields. Someone who had great understanding said, "In less than 100 years the dynasty will fall, for the rites are already neglected." From this it is evident that the portent appears first, and later the disaster itself comes about. The Great Concentration and Insight passage goes on to say, Huan Qi was a man of extraordinary talent, but he let his hair grow like a mass of brambles and left his belt undone. Later, the sons of the aristocracy all imitated him, until those who behaved in a churlish and insulting manner were thought to be acting quite naturally, and those who were restrained and proper in their behavior were ridiculed as mere peasants. This was a sign that Suma family, the rulers of the Western Qin dynasty, would meet with their downfall. Similarly, the record of a pilgrimage to China in search of the law by the great teacher Chikaku states that in the first year of the Hui Chang era, 841, Emperor Hu Song of the Tang dynasty commanded the priest Qing Shuang of Changxing Su Temple to transmit the Nembutsu teachings of the Buddha Amida in the various temples. Qing Shuang spent 3 days in each temple, going about from one temple to another without ever ceasing. In the 2nd year of the same era, soldiers from the land of the Uigurs invaded the borders of the Tang Empire. In the 3rd year of the same era, the regional commander in the area north of the Yellow River suddenly raised a revolt. Later, the kingdom of Tibet once more refused to obey orders from China, and the Uigurs repeatedly seized Chinese territory. On the whole, the conflicts and uprisings were like those that prevailed at the time when the Qin dynasty and the military leader Xuan Yu were overthrown, and the towns and villages were devastated by fire and other disasters. What was even worse, Emperor Hu Song carried out a vast campaign to wipe out Buddhist teachings and destroyed a great many temples and pagodas. He was never able to put down the uprisings and died in agony shortly after. This is the essence of Jikaku's original passage. In view of these events, we should consider the fact that Honen belonged to the time of the retired Emperor Gotoba, around the Kenin era, 1201 to 1204. And what happened to the retired emperor is evident before our very eyes. Thus, Tang China provided an earlier example of the fall of an emperor, and our own country offers similar proof. You should neither doubt this nor consider it strange. The only thing to do now is to abandon the evil ways and take up those that are good, to cut off this affliction at the source, to cut it off at the root. The guest, looking somewhat mollified, said, "Though I have not yet probed deeply into the matter, I believe I understand to some degree what you are saying. Nevertheless, throughout the area from Kyoto, the capital, to Kamakura, the headquarters of the shogun, there are numerous eminent Buddhist leaders and key figures in the clergy, and yet none of them has so far appealed to the shogun concerning this affair, or submitted a memorial to the throne. You, on the other hand, a person of humble position, think nothing of spewing out offensive accusations. Your assertion goes too far and your behavior is unreasonable." The host said, "Though I may be a person of little ability, I have reverently given myself to the study of the Mahayana. A blue fly, if it clings to the tail of a thoroughbred horse, can travel 10,000 miles, and the green ivy that twines around the tall pine can grow to 1,000 feet. I was born as the son of the one Buddha, Shakyamuni, and I serve the king of scriptures, the Lotus Sutra. How could I observe the decline of the Buddhist law and not be filled with the emotions of pity and distress? Moreover, the Nirvana Sutra states, if even a good monk sees someone destroying the teaching and disregards him, failing to reproach him, to oust him, or to punish him for his offense, then you should realize that that monk is betraying the Buddha's teaching. But if he ousts the destroyer of the law, reproaches him, or punishes him, then he is my disciple and a true voice-hearer. Although I may not be a good monk, I certainly do not want to be accused of betraying the Buddha's teaching. Therefore, in order to avoid such charges, I have cited a few general principles and given a rough explanation of the matter. Earlier in the Genin era, 1224 to 1225, petitions to the throne were submitted time and again by the two temples of Enryaku-ji and Kofuku-ji, and as a result, an imperial command and a letter of instruction from the shogunate were handed down ordering that the woodblocks used in printing Honin's Nembutsu, chosen above all, be confiscated and brought to the great lecture hall of Enryaku-ji. There they were burned in order to repay the debt owed to the Buddhas of the three existences. In addition, orders were given that the menials of Kanjinin shrine should dig up and destroy Honin's grave. Then Honin's disciples, Ryukan, Shoku, Jokaku, Shasho, and others were condemned by the imperial court to exile in distant regions and were never pardoned. In view of these facts, how can you say that no one has submitted a complaint to the authorities concerning these matters? The guest, continuing to speak in a mild manner, replied, "One could hardly say that Honin is the only one who disparages sutras and speaks ill of other priests, since you do the same thing yourself. However, it is true that he takes the 637 Mahayana scriptures in 2,883 volumes, along with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the deities of this world, and urges people to discard, close, ignore, and abandon them. There is no doubt that these 4 injunctions are his very words. The meaning of the passage is quite clear. But you keep harping on this one little flaw in the jewel and severely slandering him for it. I do not know whether he spoke out of delusion or out of enlightenment. Between you and Honen, I cannot tell which is wise and which is foolish, or determine whose assertions are right and whose are wrong. However, you assert that all the recent disasters are to be traced to Nembutsu chosen above all, speaking quite volubly on that point and elaborating on the meaning of your assertion. Now surely the peace of the world and the stability of the nation are sought by both ruler and subject and desired by all the inhabitants of the country. The nation achieves prosperity through the Buddhist law, and the law is proven worthy of reverence by the people who embrace it. If the nation is destroyed and the people are wiped out, then who will continue to pay reverence to the Buddhas? Who will continue to have faith in the law? Therefore, one must first of all pray for the safety of the nation, and then work to establish the Buddhist law. Now, if you know of any means whereby disasters can be prevented and troubles brought to an end, I would like to hear about it. The host said, "There is no doubt that I am the foolish one. I would never dare claim to be wise. However, I would just like to quote some passages from the scriptures and offer some brief thoughts. Concerning the means for ensuring order in the nation, there are numerous passages in both Buddhist and non-Buddhist texts, and it would be difficult to cite them all here. Since taking up the study of Buddhism, however, I have frequently given thought to this matter, and it seems to me that restraining those who slander the law and respecting the followers of the correct way will assure stability within the nation and peace in the world at large. In the Nirvana Sutra, we read, the Buddha said, with the exception of one type of person, you may offer alms to all kinds of persons and everyone will praise you. Chunda said, what do you mean when you speak of one type of person? The Buddha replied, I mean the type described in this sutra as violators of the precepts. Chunda spoke again, saying, I'm afraid I still do not understand. May I ask you to explain further? The Buddha addressed Chunda, saying, by violators of the precepts, I mean the inchantika. In the case of all other types of persons, you may offer alms, everyone will praise you, and you will achieve great rewards. Chunda spoke once more, asking, what is the meaning of the term inchantika? The Buddha said, Chunda, suppose there should be monks or nuns, laymen or women, who speak careless and evil words and slander the correct teaching, and that they should go on committing these grave acts without ever showing any inclination to reform or any sign of repentance in their hearts. Persons of this kind, I would say, are following the path of ichantika. Again, there may be those who commit the 4 grave offenses or are guilty of the 5 cardinal sins, and who, though aware that they are guilty of serious faults, from the beginning have no trace of fear or contrition in their hearts, or if they do, give no outward sign of it. When it comes to the correct teaching, they show no inclination to protect, treasure, and establish it over the ages, but rather speak of it with malice and contempt, their words replete with error. People of this kind, too, I would say, are following the path of the inchantika. With the exception of this one group of people called ichantika, however, you may offer alms to all others, and everyone will praise you. Elsewhere in the same sutra, the Buddha spoke in these words, when I recall the past, I remember that I was the king of a great state in this continent of Jambudvipa. My name was Senyo. and I loved and venerated the great vehicle scriptures. My heart was pure and good, and had no trace of evil, jealousy, or stinginess. Good men, at that time, I cherished the great vehicle teachings in my heart. When I heard the Brahmins slandering these correct and equal sutras, I put them to death on the spot. Good men, as a result of that action, I never thereafter fell into hell. In another passage it says, in the past, when the thus come one was the ruler of a nation and practiced the way of the Bodhisattva, he put to death a number of Brahmins. Again it says, there are 3 degrees of killings, the lower, middle, and upper degrees. The lower degree constitutes the killing of any humble being, from an ant to any of the various kinds of animals. But the killing of any being that a bodhisattva has chosen to be born as to help other living beings is excluded. As a result of a killing of the lower degree, one will fall into the realms of hell, hungry spirits, and animals, and will suffer all the pains appropriate to a killing of the lower degree. Why should this be? Because even animals and other humble beings possess the roots of goodness, insignificant though those roots may be. That is why a person who kills such a being must suffer full retribution for his offense. Killing any person from an ordinary mortal to an anagamin constitutes what is termed the middle degree. As a consequence of such an act of killing, one will fall into the realms of hell, hungry spirits, and animals, and will suffer all the pains appropriate to the killing of the middle degree. The upper degree of killing refers to the killing of a parent, an arhat, a Brahyakambuddha, or a bodhisattva who has reached the stage of non-retrogression. For such a crime, one will fall into the great Avicii hell.